Now, in this video, I want to discuss the Muslim call to prayer and the charge of noise pollution. Every so often in many Western cities, we hear the same argument come back. The Muslim call to prayer, the Adhān, is supposedly noise pollution. And it's often framed as a neutral concern about public order. But in reality, the complaint almost always comes from people already predisposed to dislike Islam, people who reject Islam for maybe theological reasons. I'm going to look at some examples of this in a minute. And once we place the issue in the wider context of what Western societies state or claim to stand for, things like liberalism and tolerance and pluralism, the objection just completely collapses, of course. Now, Western cities are, like any major city really, are saturated with sound. We've got church bells, we've got street musicians, like here on the London Underground, construction drills, building works, and sports parade and summertime festivals and fireworks, and even the chimes of ice cream vans going around the place. All of these are just accepted as a normal part of civic life. No newspaper columnist calls them noise pollution. They are described as culture, our tradition, or the soundscape of a free society. Yet the moment a mosque broadcasts a 45-second call to prayer, and we're going to listen to one in a second, by the way, a beautiful call to prayer, suddenly it's treated as an existential threat to Western civilization. But this is not, I submit, about acoustics at all. It's really about double standards and just prejudice, just Islamophobia, really. Now, the Adhān, the call to prayer, is brief, it's always regulated, and in most cases, it's hardly audible, actually, beyond the immediate neighborhood. It marks time, just as church bells have done for centuries across Europe, bells which ring far louder and far more frequently, I think. But because these sounds are familiar, they are categorized as heritage. The Muslim call to prayer, unfamiliar to some people, is categorized as intrusion. Now, this distinction is cultural. It's not based on decibel levels. Now, I remember recently when I was in Damascus in Syria, in the hotel, I remember at 7:30 in the morning, suddenly from nowhere, there was this cacophony of sound. It was the sound of church bells ringing across Damascus from churches. Amazing experience. And it went on and on and on. I was really quite surprised, actually, the intensity and the loudness of it. But that's in a Muslim majority country. But here is a strange inconsistency in the West. Western liberalism, of course, prides itself on allowing the public expression of people's beliefs. Not hidden beliefs, not private beliefs, but public beliefs. And these same societies that light up entire cities for Christmas, as we can see around the UK and Germany with their Christmas markets, big public displays of lights and sound and so on. In cities throughout the West, people often celebrate Diwali and also the Chinese New Year. But somehow some people struggle with a short melodic call to prayer. If pluralism means anything at all, it must apply beyond many people's, or perhaps even the majority, I don't know, their cultural comfort zone. But some people might respond and say, look, religion should stay private. But this simply misunderstands the very idea of a plural public sphere. A genuinely neutral society, or even an Islamic one, and I'll come to this in a sec, is not one stripped of difference. It's one that accommodates difference within reasonable limits, the same limits that already govern concerts and festivals and every other public sound. Now, coming back to Syria and Damascus, this is a very ancient city, goes back thousands of years, probably one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. And Muslims have lived there for the last 1,400 years. And when I was there, I actually looked around the city and I visited churches. They're actually beautifully maintained. And you see the Virgin Mary, you see statues, you see lots of things, photographs of it, actually. And as I mentioned, the way the church bells peal, they ring out very publicly at certain times of day. Now, this is in a Muslim society where overwhelmingly Muslim, of course. But this is not kindness. It's not kind of benevolence among the Syrian people. It's actually the Sharia. The Sharia allows Christians and others, Jews and others, to actually practice their faith, to have their churches, to eat pork and drink wine and so on. This is permitted under Islamic law, often not realized in the West. So this is normative Islam, not some kind of liberal concession. And Syria is not a liberal place, believe me. It's definitely full-on Sunni Muslim. Now, alhamdulillah, it's returning to sanity, and it's progressing marvelously economically and politically, although it's facing huge challenges. We're not going to go into that here. So I just want to point out that pluralism is in the DNA of Islam. It's not really in the DNA of liberalism, because liberalism in the West is really configured around a certain secular post-Christian understanding of life. It doesn't fit very comfortably with other expressions of faith, particularly Islam, although logically, rationally, it should, because that is the logic of liberal and pluralist beliefs. So who are these people who are opposing the Adhān? And I mentioned earlier that these are usually people who are opposed to Islam anyway for ideological reasons or theological reasons. So, for example, looking at this website, Christian Concern, and this is a UK-based hardline evangelical group, very active, very litigious. They like to go after people. And this article, Stopping the Newham Call to Prayer, and a guest post from an anonymous resident in Newham. Newham's a London borough, and you can see it's dripping with dislike and distaste, and really the whole idea that Muslims should have a presence in Britain is treated with, they're enraged by it. So it says, in early May 2020, the airy summer breeze flows and all is serene. Then suddenly Islamic religious proselytization is rung in the airwaves. What? Disrupting the peaceful stillness. Residents in the vicinity of the mosques producing this sound can hear the Arabic tune as it pierces through the walls of their homes, so bashing through their walls. Translated, the jarring melody, so these judgments, very harsh judgments, repetitiously proclaim that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger, immediately followed by the command to prayer. I'm not going to read it all through. I noticed the third paragraph, fourth paragraph, I was enraged. So this person is really upset by people calling to prayer. Now, this is motivated by fundamentalist Christianity. This is not a serious engagement with the issues. And as I say, in Muslim majority, the vast majority of Muslim countries, Christians are free to worship as they see fit, but they don't particularly want to extend the courtesy to historic Christian countries, even if they are a bit post-Christian these days. Now, there is an alternative view, which I want to share with you, where a Christian woman hears the Adhān for the first time. It's a very well-known video. It's very beautiful, and I want to share it with you because it gives you a sense of a different, more spiritual, more open attitude to calls to prayer. And I'll just share the video with you here. It's a lovely video. You might have seen it before, but it's worth watching again. It's basically a Muslim call to prayer makes a Christian lady cry. She's so affected by the beauty of it. Have a listen. Beautiful thing.
As sunset approaches, Sammy wants me to experience Jeddah's unique call to prayer. Wow, what timing! From every direction.
36 mosques in 1 square kilometer. And it's been calling for 1400 years.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And it is the same word from the time of the Prophet. And look, people closing their shops. And and everybody is going to pray.
Oh,
The closing.
just magical. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's such an incredible sight and sound that I find myself completely overcome.
And soon they will be reading Quran, and maybe one of them will be reading the story of Jesus and Mary, because it's in the Quran, and Moses. Look at the shop they're closing to go to pray.
I feel quite moved.
It is a nice experience.
Beautiful.
And it's authentic, and it's human. It's not recorded. So each guy is calling. And in the past, 100 years ago, before the introduction of the microphones, they used to go all the way to the top, and he calls. And then everybody hears.
So that's an amazing, absolutely amazing shot. And it shows that not all, even Christians can have different responses to the beautiful call to prayer. The Christian Concern article, anonymous from Newham, just has revulsion towards calling to prayer. But this other person has a much more spontaneous and open and natural affinity with this beautiful call to prayer. And I think the most beautiful call to prayer I ever heard, and I wasn't expecting it, to be honest, when I was on Hajj a couple of years ago in Mecca, in the mosque there, and suddenly this voice, not recorded or anything, a real human, beautiful voice came out, and the most stunning sound I've ever heard in the mosque in Mecca. So this is the reality of the call to prayer. It's a call for human beings to worship their Creator and to turn away from worldly occupations and to focus on God, which is, of course, the purpose of our existence here. Just want to share with you that beautiful video. So when people label the Adhān noise pollution after what we've just heard, they are not describing a sound problem at all. What they are revealing is the fragility of their own commitment to pluralism they claim to defend, because these same right-wing Christians claim to be defending, freedom and stuff, but actually they're not really. They actually have their own agenda, which is to stop any worship of God that's not Christian. So it's actually quite anti-pluralist, anti-liberal when it comes to freedom of worship. And as I said already, the DNA of Islam protects the right legally of Muslims and Jews and many others to worship in their temples and in their mosques and so on. That's always been the case. Now, there are one or two exceptions to that historically, to do with certain areas around what is now Saudi Arabia, but their exceptions are not the rule. The rule is, generally speaking, outside of Arabia, that there is freedom of worship. And there are particular historical reasons associated with the sanctity of Mecca and Medina. I'm not going to go into that there. So before everyone says, what about Mecca and Medina? That they are special areas reserved for Muslims alone. But there are over 2 billion Muslims in the world living in most countries, and in all of these places and other Muslim majority countries, non-Christians and non-Muslims rather are free to worship in their temples and shrines and churches, as I have seen. So hope you found that of interest. Let me know what you think. Till next time.